Wherever you want to sit.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine. How about you?
Good.
Were you able to get on?
See you.
Here we go. I didn't.
You're all set to go now.
Oh, thank you so much.
Apologies about that.
We're good. I just put it on hold, basically.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly.
Want me to sit down? Get up?
Yeah, I think Marilyn will be called up in just a moment. We'll give Chris like 2 minutes to get back to. Yeah, I think we're. Yeah, I think we're good to go. We tested the mic and everything.
Chicken.
Great.
Text me if you need me.
Yep, I will absolutely do that. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
I can, if everybody has the Wi-Fi already.
I mean, both parents are trainers. Where should I be facing? I said, she's gonna do some crawling in the water, so she won't be such a chub. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Oh, cute.
Either one. That's fine, that's fine. Either
Just
side.
wait a minute until some people who are coming in get seated. On behalf of Sinai Temple and Sisterhood, I would like to warmly welcome all of you and thank you for joining us tonight, both here in person and on Zoom. This program actually grew out of the Sisterhood Interest Questionnaire, where many of you expressed an interest in genealogy. So we're very happy to be able to bring this program to our community. I'd also like to thank Amanda Harrison, Sinai Temple's Program and Engagement Coordinator, and Pam Schoenberg, Sisterhood Board Member, for their help in making this program possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, E. Randall Schoenberg. Randy is a Los Angeles-based lawyer and genealogist who specializes in cases involving the recovery of artworks looted by the Nazis during the Holocaust. Many people know Randy from the landmark case brought by Maria Altman against the government of Austria to recover Gustav Klimt paintings that had been stolen from her family. That story was portrayed in the film Women in Gold, where Randy was played by Ryan Reynolds. More recently, Randy is featured in the documentary Fioretta, which follows Randy and his son Joey as they travel through Europe, tracing their family's history and uncovering remarkable stories about their ancestors. What many people may not know is that Randy has been passionate about genealogy since 5th grade and has spent years helping people uncover their family histories. Pam tells me that Randy knows more about her family than she does. We are especially proud that Randy is also a member of Sinai Temple. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Randy Schoenberg.
Thanks so much, Marilyn. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight to talk about my favorite thing, genealogy. And this is something that CC Legwas wanted me to do, I think, for about 10 years, and we finally made it happen. So thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Pam, for organizing everything. It's really nice to do it, in this particular space because we're coming up, I think, next month on 28 years since our daughter Dora had her baby naming in Cone Chapel. So we've been around for a little bit here. So let me dive in. What the program is tonight is I'm going to spend maybe 20 minutes or so going through some slides talking about some basics of really regarding a platform that I use to build my family tree. And then we're going to turn that off, and I'll do demonstrations and answer questions that people might have, and use that as a way of teaching people how to work on your family tree. Okay, so I think I have to use this maybe for the audience online to listen. But let's go into the to this presentation. Let me see if this works. So yeah, the first slide is some evidence that I have been at this a long time. I'm going to be 60 this year, and this is me at age 11, actually just before my 11th birthday. Pointing to a large family tree, and it demonstrates, I use this also to demonstrate one of the issues that we have. When you do a family tree, you start out, it's relatively easy. You've got 2 parents, 4 grandparents, you might have some siblings, some cousins, but it quickly gets very large, right? And I found this out already, 50 years ago in doing this. When you're trying to graphically represent a family tree and you try to go up and then back down, it doesn't work because the ones in the middle, there's sort of nowhere to go, right? So there's really no good way to have a two-dimensional representation of a family tree, and it's one of the reasons why it's very useful to use the software that we have now that wasn't available 50 years ago, to organize our family trees and to build our family trees and just to be able to see it in a way that makes sense for us. So let me talk to you about some of the problems that we all face when we do our genealogy. We want to make connections with family and learn about ancestors, how they lived, right? That's sort of the initial impetus. But often we don't know how to do that, right? How do you go about learning about your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, et cetera? We face what genealogists like to call brick walls. In other words, I knew my grandmother, but I don't know who her parents were. I don't know where she's from. A lot of American Jews, for example, don't know the original town that the family came from. They just know they came from Russia or they came from Austria, right? Which can be a giant area back in those days. And where exactly it is and how to find that is one of the problems we have. There are a lot of different sources now and websites and ways to find out information, but maybe not enough hours in the day to do it. Well, maybe for you there is. For me, there's never enough time to do genealogy because I just have endless problems and puzzles that I want to solve. We all face language barriers. No matter how many languages you have learned, you're going to come back to a place where you can't read what you need to read in order to find the information. Records, when you do find them, are sometimes very hard to decipher. Increasingly, they're good tools for that, which we could talk about if someone asks about it. And the other problem, and maybe it's why you all came here today, is sometimes you need some help and you don't know where to find it, right? You're sitting home working on your family tree, but who is going to help you? So I'm going to talk about how we can solve some of these problems. The platform I like to use is called Geni, Geni, Geni.com. It's actually based in Burbank. It was founded here some 20-something years ago, or I guess it's coming up on 20 years ago. And it's actually owned and has been since 2012 by MyHeritage, which is an Israeli genealogy company. So a lot of us here in the United States have seen advertisements for Ancestry.com, right? They're always, so MyHeritage is sort of the main competitor to Ancestry. And they're based in Israel, near Tel Aviv, and they've purchased a lot of companies, including Geni, which is here in Burbank, and they have a sort of whole collection of companies and compete with Ancestry. So Geni is, in my and most people's opinion, the leading collaborative genealogy platform. It has users around the world that all work together on one single comprehensive family tree. So you can build a private tree of your close relatives and connect to this sort of shared public tree. It's very easy to build a tree on Geni. Again, this is a software that allows you to enter the data for your family and then collaborate with other people. And it's easy to start projects. I'm going to talk about how useful those are because it's one of the unique features of Geni. As your tree grows, Geni automatically will look for matches in other trees and other sources. So they'll look on MyHeritage, they'll look on, there's another website called Family Search, which is run by the Mormons, and that's all sort of integrated together. So while you're building on Geni, you can take advantage of work on other platforms, which is also a real benefit. And you can be notified of matches and find information that will allow your tree to grow faster. Eventually, if you start on Geni from scratch, you will build out and get a match to something someone else has added onto the tree. So imagine Geni is like a giant jigsaw puzzle. You start with your few pieces all alone, and then ultimately you're going to merge in, you're going to connect to the rest of the puzzle because we're all of us related. And that's sort of the number one theme, I think, of this talk is that all of us, Jews especially, are closely related. It doesn't matter where your family is from. Everybody has a connection to everybody else, and I'll demonstrate that. Okay, so yeah, eventually you'll merge with this tree that has, at present, I think 208 million, I just took the screenshot, 208 million connected profiles. So each profile is an individual. And the idea on Genie is there are no duplicates, right? There's just one George Washington, one Abraham Lincoln, and one you on this tree of now 208 million connected people. So listen, there are 7-8 billion people in the world. Historically, there have been another several billion living, so we have a long way to go before filling out the family tree of the human race, but it's a pretty good start, and it's the largest or one of the largest collaborative trees in existence. The other two options, if you're into collaborative genealogy, is the Mormon website, which a lot of Jews do not like to do because of a history of posthumous baptism by the Mormons, which they don't do anymore, but a lot of Jews avoid it. So it's really, if you want to work with other Jewish people collaborating, Genie is a better option. And then the third option is something called Wicked Tree, which is about 1/10 the size of Genie. So it's a good program, but it can't really ever catch up with what Genie has done. So that's why most of us who work in this field are working on Genie right now. Now, one thing you have to understand is that working collaboratively is always better than working alone. This is very tough for some people. They say, it's my family, I own it, I don't trust anybody else, they're gonna make mistakes. That works up to a point, but when you want to do a large project, you could build a hut by yourself, but you're not gonna build a skyscraper, you're not gonna build a house. You need to have the help of other people. And ultimately, if you're working on your family tree, your tree is going to be larger than anything you can do by yourself. That's the goal, right? It's not just the 15, 20, 100, 200 people it's the thousands, tens of thousands of relatives that you actually have that you're hoping to find. And that's just more than any one person can do. And so you want to be collaborating with other people. You also want to preserve your work for the future, right? You're doing this for yourself, sure, and all of us start out, I think, with a sort of narcissistic attitude of it's all about me when I work on my family tree because I'm doing sort of a self-exploration, but ultimately, you do want all this work you're doing to be passed on to other generations or to be used by other members of your family. And so Genie is a very good platform for that. I always upload all the documents I find to Genie because when I'm gone, they'll still be there and available for anybody else interested in my family tree. It turns out that getting help is much easier on Genie than any of the other platforms. You will not get help if you're working on Ancestry or MyHeritage from other people, but Genie is a community, and when they designed it in 2007, it was during the dot-com bubble, and there were all these companies like Facebook starting up, and so they invested it with a little bit of a social aspect. So you get a news feed of what all your family members and collaborators are doing on the family tree. And they have discussions that are public, so you can start a public discussion and have other people join in. So there's a little bit of a social element. And they make it just very easy for you to find help with problems, or if you have an issue with something that someone has done on the family tree. Your relatives are also more likely to use Genie than any other platform. One of the problems with building your own individual tree on, let's say, Ancestry or MyHeritage, is that it's called, my tree would be called the Randy Schoenberg family tree, right? So if I invite my cousin to collaborate on that, which you can do on Ancestry or MyHeritage, they might be into it a little bit, but they're not going to invest a lot of time and effort in the Randy Schoenberg family tree. On Genie, no one owns the tree, right? It's a giant puzzle that everybody's working on. So when you add in your cousin, they can work on the side that you have in common, but they can also go ahead and work on other parts of their tree, which are not your blood relations. And there's no problem with that because there's no ownership. They're not working on your tree, they're working on our tree. So collaboration is much more likely on Genie. Genie has been designed by its programmers. Again, I don't work for Genie. I'm not paid by them. I have no economic interest. I wish I owned it, but I do not. And so it's just a small company. I think there are 5 employees, and they are constantly working on improving the tree building aspects. The other platforms, again, MyHeritage and Ancestry would be the main ones, they have other features that are more lucrative, basically, which is why they're bigger companies, and more important to them, therefore, than the tree building aspects. And those, if I can back up a little bit, the model for Ancestry and MyHeritage is data aggregation. What do I mean by that? Every 10 years, the US releases a census, right? So the last one was 1950 census. And these companies hire people in India or China or wherever to transcribe the census and make a computerized index. And then they sell people access to that data. So Ancestry and MyHeritage are in the business of collecting data sets and selling access. Genie has none of that. Genie is only about the tree building, which is why it has, I think, the best features for that. One of the sort of killer applications of Genie is something called the relationship finder. So you can take any two individuals that are connected to this giant puzzle, and Genie will see if it can find a path between them. Now, it doesn't work for every two people that are connected, right? So if you took someone, and someone who's a native Eskimo, right, who's connected somehow to the tree, and you, it's too many cousin of cousin of cousin relationships. But I'm telling you, for Jews, it's automatic, right? Every Jew is connected, usually cousin to cousin to cousin, about 3 families. Sometimes there'll be 4, sometimes more. Can't tell if this is where I tell the story or later in my presentation, but it fits here as well. When my kids were here at Sinai Akiva, they had a genealogy project in 5th grade. And when my youngest son, Joey, was in 5th grade, he said, well, he has to do his project. I said, okay, you figure out what you're going to do. I'm going to do my own project on you in your class. And I took all, I think it was 53 or 56 kids in his class, and I made sure their families were on Genie. Some were already on, some were not, and I added them in. And I showed him how he was related to every single person in the class. So every person in the class was related to every others. By related, I mean connected on Genie, cousin of cousin of cousin. And sure, the Moroccans can be tough, but one of them has a Ashkenaz wife, and then you're off to the races, right? That's how the families go. And so that is possible. And on Genie, I'm telling you, it's sort of automatic. Here, this was from last year's Academy Awards, right? There's Mickey Madison and Adrian Brody both won the Best Actor and Actress, and I showed how they're connected, and it's through 3 families, of course. This is and I can share, by the way, the slides, a link where you can download this presentation. This is an application I developed with some programmers for the Anu Museum in Tel Aviv, using Genie as a backbone. So the Anu Museum used to be called Beit Hatfutzot. If you went there a while ago, it's on Tel Aviv University campus, and it's the Museum of the Jewish People. Anu means we, right? So that's their rebranding, but it's about all the Jewish people, especially the Jews in the diaspora. And they have on the wall lots of famous Jews, right? Golda Meir and Menachem Begin and Albert Einstein and Sigmund Freud, that type of thing. And I said, what we can do? We can take, using Genie, we can have anybody who comes to the museum using a sort of an application on their phone, they can find out how they're related or connected to every single person on display in the museum, and also find out how they're related to anybody else in the museum who's using the app. So this is an app that does that. Later I can show you how it works, and it'll show you how we're related to all the famous Jews in that museum. Genie, it's one of the paradoxes of Genie that a lot of people who don't like it will tell you, oh, I looked on Genie at my family and there were so many mistakes, okay? Now, we all make mistakes. Some of us admit that, others do not. But the key fact about Genie is that when you find a mistake, you can fix it. So either you can fix it or you can get help fixing it on Genie. And that makes the Genie tree by far the most accurate tree in existence in just about every area. If it is not accurate in your particular area of expertise, well, that's on you, right? Because you're the one that knows that there's something wrong and you should be fixing it, right? Because it's private to you, maybe the information. But in general, the Gini tree is super accurate, and I am constantly finding mistakes that I made 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And not only I am finding them, other people are finding them. You want to have more eyes than just your two looking at your tree, because you know how it is sometimes when you look at your own work, you don't see the mistake. When you look at someone else's, you see it right away. So on Gini, because it's a public tree for the most part, everybody can look at it and find and correct your mistakes. I didn't mention it yet, but you can use Gini totally for free. It works on something called a freemium model. So when you join, the head of it advises people not to pay. You know, it'll ask you if you want a pro membership, but the pro membership doesn't have a lot of advantages. And certainly for beginners, it's not necessary at all to pay for Gini. So you can use it for free. The one thing you can't do without a pro subscription is search on Gini, but since Gini is a public website, you can search on Google and find a lot of the things that are on Gini that way. So but I definitely use it for free and tell your relatives to use it for free. So I mentioned this, Gini, the World Family Tree is mostly public. What does that mean? So it has a whole privacy regime. A lot of people are crazy about privacy issues, and it takes that all into account. So you as an individual member of Gini can make yourself private, that for sure. So if you don't want anybody else to be able to see your personal information, you can do that. By default, living people are private and deceased are usually public. You do have the possibility of making deceased people private, I think up to 150 years. I do not advise it because it defeats the whole purpose of a collaborative tree. If you make things private, then no one can see them. The exception to the living is private rule is for what we call master profiles. So for famous people, Donald Trump, the King of England, right? People who are living that other people might want to search for, we have an ability to make, just like they have Wikipedia pages, they also have public Gini pages. So that works relatively well. You can be part of an international community of genealogists. This was really the big benefit for me. Like you saw, I had been very active in genealogy. And you can be very active in genealogy and not be aware of what other people do, right? And what other people are capable of, and get help from people in distant areas because it's just very difficult. On Gini, there's a real community. And what they did was they elevated some of the people who used it quite a lot and were experienced to volunteer curators. So for example, I'm one of 200 or 250 volunteer curators on Gini. I'm given the ability to see the private profiles so that I can help people when they have issues on Gini, and there are hundreds of us. There's a discussion you can find on Gini if you're looking for help. It says, attention curators, please assist. And you can put your question there saying, I'm having difficulty with this. This area is all tangled up. Someone messed this up. Can you help me? And there's always someone working on Gini. It's worldwide. So it doesn't matter if it's 3 in the morning here. There's someone in Europe who's available to assist you almost instantaneously. So it's really nice that way. Gini, as I just mentioned, is a global phenomenon. It's not just for Jews. It's not just for anybody. It's for all humans. And so people are using it. For a while, it was the number 3 website in Estonia, for example. And you know how the internet goes in sort of waves like this, but there are a whole bunch of communities that use Gini. I mentioned discussions, and I can show you that when we demonstrate some things, but there are, on any profile, so a profile is a person, right? If you have a question, you can start a discussion, and it's a public discussion, so other people who are collaborating with you or following you will see that you started a discussion on Rabbi Moshe, right? And you want to know who are his parents, right? And everybody can see that, and then you can have a discussion. Sometimes the evidence that we have conflicts, and we need to work things out collaboratively together. So the discussions stay on the profile so you can see, how is this resolved? Is his father Isaac? Is his father Samuel? Right? Here's what the evidence, here's what all the interested people said, and then you can reactivate the discussion if you have another question. So it's really an amazing tool. There's a lot of innovation You can, because Genie allows people to write programs like that one for the Tel Aviv University that use Genie. There's some very good programming curators who have devised tools. One of them is called Smart Copy, which allows you to copy very quickly information from another platform like Ancestry or MyHeritage or Family Search onto the Genie platform, sort of one family at a time. Genie allows what's called GEDCOM importing. So GEDCOM is the standard for genealogy that computers use for storing information. And you can, in theory, sort of export and then import from one platform to another. Genie discourages the importing because on Genie, we already have a very complete tree that covers a lot of people. So if you have on your home computer, for example, a program that has a family tree and it has 2,000, 3,000 people, it's not necessary to import all 3,000 up to Genie. You probably only have to do 50 or 75. And so you use Smart Copy to do that rather than make duplications. The problem with duplications is that, remember, Genie's idea is one person, one profile. So if two people add the same person, Genie will ultimately ask you to merge them together into one, right? So if you do a lot of duplicates, it creates a lot of merging. Anyway, that's probably not necessary to talk about. Genie was the first company to incorporate DNA into its tree building software, and it has, these are old figures, but it gives you an idea that people have connected. If you've done your DNA testing and you have it on Family Tree DNA, which is one of the companies that does the DNA testing, and they're sort of the best because they do the Y DNA. They're the only ones that do Y DNA, which is the paternal line. Family Tree DNA and Genie have a link so that you can get the results back and forth on that. Unfortunately, MyHeritage, the parent company, has not allowed Genie, its own company, to link to MyHeritage DNA results. We're still working on that. But Genie does have DNA possibilities. You want to make your tree accessible to the people who want to see it or that you want to see it, right? So your kids, your grandkids, right? You're putting up all your old photographs, information, stories about your grandmother, et cetera, right? So where are they going to be looking? Where are your grandkids 100% of the day? On their phones, right? On their computers, right? So if your family tree is in a book, in a drawer, if it's on your laptop at home, they are not going to find it. But if you put it on the internet, right, your grandkids might ultimately take an interest and look at the work that you've done. At least that's the hope. My friend and fellow curator Adam Brown likes to point out that Genie, the method on Genie is the definition of the scientific method. So what's the scientific method? You have sort of a hypothesis, right? And you test it and you publicize it, right? So if you're a scientist and you do an experiment, right? You have results, you don't just keep it in your drawer or on your private computer at home. You publish it, and then other people can look at your work and try to replicate it and see if you made a mistake or if they have something to add, right? That's how Genie works. And that is the definition of the scientific method. And it's the best to the extent that genealogy is a science, right? This is the way to do it. It's not, doing something privately is not science, right? You need to publish. You can help yourself by helping others. This is what I learned, right? So I had learned a lot about my own family, but then I learned how to help other people, and all of a sudden, the ideas and techniques I was using to help other people, when I revisited some of my own family tree, right, then it opened up new avenues for me to research. So I find that's also an advantage. Okay, so I'm finishing up with the presentation. One of the things that I find unique on Genie is the ability to combine our own personal research into our own family with a bit larger perspective. And one of the things that you learn when you do Jewish genealogy is it's all about location, right? So it's different researching in Latvia and in Tehran and in Fez, Morocco, and in Paris, right? Every location has different type of resources, different type of information. So you want to build a community of people who are experts in that particular area. So ordinarily, without Genie, you would try to look on websites to find out about a town. You'd look in books, Facebook groups, journals, and newsletters, but none of those have any family information, right? If you go on Wikipedia, you're not going to find information about your family when you're looking at a town. So how do we combine that? Most platforms have no ability to do this. I don't need to repeat that. But on Genie, we have this ability to make projects. So anybody can make a project. It functions a little bit like Wikipedia, where you just sort of click a button. I can show you how to do it. It takes 5 seconds. And you can create a project, name it, invite people to it, add information on it. And what we've done in the Jewish genealogy world is we've created town projects. So we've tried to identify Jewish communities, in Europe especially, but everywhere. And we've created projects for those communities and then linked family trees, so linked individuals from that community to the project. So you can go to the project for a specific town and find a whole bunch of people who actually were from that town, and you can contact the people who added those profiles, and presumably they're going to be interested also in that town, and learn about how do I find, for example, the cemetery, right, records for that town. Are there any town lists? Are there any censuses, right? It's all individual by town, so no one can be an expert on every place in the world. You want to find the people who are interested in your part of the world. So I think I'm not going to go into all of this in this demonstration, but I can demonstrate it individually if you're interested in that. So this is all about that. This is something I did actually a long time ago, is I used a project to make a directory of all the Jewish projects, right? So how are you going to find the projects? I mean, you can search for them individually, but we decided to make sort of a telephone book type directory, and it's organized geographically. So you can find, and also thematically, like Holocaust projects. There are a number of those, but also by geography. And so you can find, it has sort of a layered structure, right? So you'd find the project for Belarus, and then in that project, there'll be a list of all the towns in Belarus that you can click on that and then find the project for an individual town. And so we've done quite a lot of those. I've worked, for example, on Vienna and Prague, where I have a list of all of the sort of major family names, at least one member of each family in the project. So if you're looking for a family from Prague, you can look on this project, click that, and immediately be part of that family tree and be able to look at all of it. There's the Theresienstadt Ghetto project, which has, I think, 50,000 profiles added to it by now. That's, there's 144,000 Jews who are in Theresienstadt, so we have a ways to go, but it's a laborious process, right? Finding people and adding them to the project, but that's happening every day. You can edit the projects very easy. There's formatting tools, but this is a little bit too much information. And then you can add a profile, so any profile on Genie can be added to one of these projects if it's public. So any public, so not a living person, not a Genie user, but any deceased public person or a master profile, if it's a living person, can be added to a project. So here's how I did it for my grandfather. Finding collaborators for your projects. I give tips here. Again, I can let you have access to this PowerPoint so you can see how to do that. But on Google, it's very easy to find Genie profiles from a particular town. You do a Google search with the town name and you say +site:genie.com, and that your results will be only Genie websites, right, that mention that town, right? So if you're looking for a specific town and you want to see if anybody else has added that on Genie, you can just go to Google and do that. MyHeritage and Jewish Gen have also features that you can find people. So what have I learned through collaborating? First, that everybody in my ancestral town, right, is related and connected to everybody else in the town. So don't, what is the saying, no man is an island, right? You're going to find, once you get back to your ancestral village, that these families have lived there for decades, or for centuries sometimes, and they've all woven together, right? So everybody is related to everybody else. There's no such thing as not being interested in someone from a particular, especially a small town in Eastern Europe. Everybody there is your cousin, everybody knew your family, everybody was at the wedding, everybody was at the bar mitzvah. You want to talk to these other families because they are your family also. We should not ever limit our genealogy just to our blood relatives. I used to say this. I used to say, oh, I have enough trouble with my own family. I don't need to work on Pam's, right, on the in-laws and all that. It turns out everybody is all connected, right? So there is no my family, your family. It's all our family. And as I said before, working together on a collaborative tree, we can accomplish so much more than we ever could working alone. So anyway, you could take a picture of this if you want. I think that URL is from a previous presentation, so it might not say Sinai on it, but has the same information, because I forgot to update that. But this is sort of the end of the presentation part. Now, what I wanted to do, since all of you, or many of you, were good enough to bring your computers along, I want to show you some things and answer questions and do sort of a hands-on training a little bit until we have to quit, until everybody gets too tired of talking about genealogy, because as Marilyn and Pam said, I could talk for days on end without noticing that we were going on and on and on. So thank you very, very much. And let's talk some more about genealogy. So let's see if there are any questions while I set up to do some of the other things I was going to do. But let me.
I know you addressed privacy a little. I'm just curious.
Sure.
With all the identity theft and fraud issues, I mean, you're a pretty sensible gentleman. Does that concern you at all? And
right, so the question is identity theft, is that an issue? I gave a long talk at the genealogy conference that we had in Jerusalem. That's a long time ago, 10, 11 years ago on this, and I've given talks on privacy. I did research into it, and the truth is that there's never been any instance of identity theft based on a family tree. Not a single one. I've challenged people all the time. Everybody thinks it's happened, right? Everybody says, oh, I heard it happened, but it's never actually happened. And why is that? It's because identity theft is something else. It's not stealing your mother, okay? It's trying to take your property, and it functions in two ways. It's criminal activity. One is through the sort of batch theft of credit card data, right? So when you use your credit card at a merchant, they store certain information. If that information is stolen, people can run the credit card, and so that happens. The other type is a little bit more insidious, and it's usually someone who knows you, who has access to you and your mail. So it happens oftentimes it's someone living in the home or in the apartment building, someone working at the bank who has access to your information, and they forge your information, right? But neither of those have anything to do with family tree, right? So I mean, it's true that often people will use sort of mother's maiden name as a sort of safe word, but that's really sort of a marketing technique, I think, that the banks use to make you feel comfortable. It doesn't actually impact the fraudsters, because the fraudsters don't need that information. So that's the issue with privacy. It's really not, it's a concern because people think it's a concern, but it's not based on any reality. My heritage, yes. Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't even answer it.
Okay.
It was Schoenberg.
Yeah, but so someone was looking into Ancestry and sent you a message, and they were from Russia. It's possible. It's not likely to have anything to do with fraud. I'm telling you, there's not, you can, if I'm wrong, go and find it and show me the proven case of fraud conviction based on a family tree. I will change my talk, but I've been giving this talk for 12 years now, and not a single person has come up with one.
What can you say about problematic data sets, like the transcriptions of the Ellis Island deprecation papers? Sorry,
so the example was the Ellis Island. There is a good database for Ellis Island, the Steve Morse database. Ellis Island has its own database. Steve Morse has a website that allows you to access the Ellis Island database and search it. What do you find problematic in it?
For example, I found my grandfather's embarkation papers, but it took so much work. It was transcribed not as Israel Lefkowitz, but as Playa Rodskowitz or something. It was
Yeah, transcription errors definitely occur in all data sets. You know, my area of focus is Czech Jewish records. They're mostly in German, actually. And we have a group in India that is going through the records. They're impossible to read, and they're doing the best they can in transcribing, and people send me corrections, and we try to correct them. There's no perfect data set, and that's why people do their own research. You can't get upset about it. I think you just have to do the work. Sometimes with Ellis Island, it is difficult. People, the grandmother you knew as Sadie, she came over with a completely different name, Shapsa or something like that, right? That happens all the time. Surnames were not changed at Ellis Island, but Jews who arrived at Ellis Island got off the boat, and their cousin who met them said, "Oh my God, you have to change your name from Ishkabibble, okay, because no one will be able to spell it here. From now on, you're going to be Isaacs," okay? That happened all the time. And so it's very difficult sometimes to find the ship manifest. Pam's family is a great example. Her mom's family lived in Milwaukee, and they came over relatively early, so 1890 something, before the Ellis Island doesn't have the manifest for that early when they came over. Her great-grandmother, all the records said she was from Austria, right? But where in Austria? At that time, Austria is Austria-Hungary, so it includes what's now Ukraine and Poland and Romania and Hungary and everything in between. And everywhere it said no information, and I even found her naturalization. I thought, okay, I'm going to finally get it, right? She naturalized. She wasn't born. She was a baby when she came over, and it'll say where she's from. And the naturalization form says, you know, under penalty of perjury, place of birth unknown. Signed, right? Like who doesn't know where they're born? I thought maybe she's born on the boat, right? Coming over. I mean, anything's possible. Someone helped me figure it out. I didn't figure it out, but they're near Chernovitz, which is now Ukraine, and that's where they're from, because we found something related to one of her brothers that said where they were from. But it's sometimes extremely hard. We get these brick walls all the time. But in general, the Ellis Island database is pretty good. I'm not so good at using it because most of my research is all over in Europe for my family, came over more recently. But one great resource that I forgot to talk about is there's a Facebook group that I started up, I think, 10 years ago. It has now 60 or 70,000 members. It's called the Jewish Genealogy Portal. So if you're on Facebook, look up Jewish Genealogy Portal. You can request to join. You have to answer 3 questions, like what towns are you interested in and that type of thing. And you'll be admitted by the administrators. I'm one of them. And you can ask questions there. So when I get Ellis Island questions, when I'm helping people, I immediately go to the Jewish Genealogy Portal on Facebook and say, I cannot find this person, right? And there are dozens of people who like nothing more than to solve these puzzles, and they'll look and they'll find the misspelled things because they know how to go. If you find the naturalization, it'll tell you which ship and the date of the ship, so you can then go to that ship and you go through the manifest and you can look at it. It's hard. It's very, very difficult sometimes with these. But you can imagine your relatives came over speaking Yiddish. They arrive in Hamburg or Amsterdam and they get on a boat and they have to tell the guy to write the name, and who knows what language the clerk spoke. And so there are transcription errors and reading errors all the time because it's these little scribble things. But those manifests are really good sources of information because many of them will say the last residents, who were you living with, who back in the home country did you leave behind? And they'll say, my uncle so-and-so in whatever town, right? And that gives you the information. And they'll say, who are you coming to visit, right? And they'll say, my brother, my cousin, my uncle in New York, and they'll give the address, and then you can use census data and try to find them. And there's a lot of tricks. It's a lot of work, but you can do things. More questions? Yes.
Thank you for this. This is fascinating. So you mentioned DNA testing. And
Yes.
I was wondering if you could share your insights around, I know that it became very popular, then
Sure.
there were privacy concerns that circulated. I don't know how truthful those are. So just any insights on that, and then
Sure.
specifically on the
Sure.
family tree DNA that you recommended.
On family tree DNA?
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
yeah, DNA has sort of been the hot topic in genealogy for a decade or so now. The main providers would be Ancestry, I think, has the biggest database now. 23andMe, which sort of went in and out of bankruptcy or some type of restructuring, but is more health related. MyHeritage offers a DNA test. Matter of fact, the owner of MyHeritage surprised me last summer. He said, "I have a surprise for you." He bought an envelope, a letter with an envelope that my grandfather had sent, and was able to take DNA off of the envelope and tested it. And he said, "We'll see if, who knows if he's the one that licked it, right?" And it was either that or a stamp, something like that. And sure enough, it matched as a grandfather for me and my cousin who had tested in that database. So those things do work. As I mentioned, there are sort of two types of DNA testing. One is called autosomal. Autosomal is the generic DNA soup that you get from your father and mother, and they mix together. My sister's a geneticist, so she could explain things a lot better than I can. But, in general, you get some from the dad, you get some from the mom, it mixes together, and that's your DNA. And what they'll do is they'll compare snippets of that match another person, and how closely related you are determines sort of how many and how large the snippets are that match between you and another person. So if you have a lot of matching little pieces, because when it combines together, it's not just like one unit from your mom, one from your dad, one from your mom, one from your dad. It'll be 5 from your dad, 3 from your mom, 6 from your dad, right? Those type of clumps. And so if the clumps are the same between you and another person, that will generally indicate that you're closely related. The problem for Jews, for Ashkenazi Jews, I should say, or for any community that was endogamous, meaning sort of isolated and marrying itself, like if you're from Tahiti, right, and has a small founder population, and for centuries everybody's just marrying themselves, it's all the same soup. Your mom and dad have the same stuff. And so when they combine, even though you get 3 from your mom and 5 from your dad, it looks like 8 from one person because they're both the same, right? So when Jews test, everybody looks like a second or third cousin. I'm sure some of you have tried this out, and you go on and says, this person is your probable second or third cousin, and you never heard of that person. Your second cousins, they're from a different part of the world. But we all look the same in the DNA, for better or worse. So there's one type of DNA that's different, and that is the paternal line DNA does not get combined, right? Because the Y chromosome only comes from the father. Women don't have it, only men have it. So men can do a Y DNA test. And my friend Adam Brown then spearheaded a whole survey of Jewish Y DNA, right? To try to see what we could learn from testing thousands and thousands of Jewish males from all different parts of the Jewish experience, whether it's Iraqi, Bukhari, Moroccan, Ashkenaz, Sephardic, Western Sephardic, that type of thing. And what they found was that for the Ashkenazi world, there are about 12 different major types of Y DNA that basically everybody has. For the non-Ashkenazi world, it's much more diffuse. And so Ashkenazi Jews who test their Y DNA normally get lots and lots of matches. I did test my Schoenberg DNA, and I came up with no matches. So I tested my dad, and he matched me. Nice, it's very good. Then another Schoenberg from the same town in Hungary tested, and he was a little bit distant, but did match us. And so the thinking that the researchers have on my particular Y DNA is that it's non-Ashkenaz. Because the Ashkenazi DNA, again, there's a few founding populations, and there's a huge population growth, and so there are lots of people with the same Y chromosome. marker, mine is probably a late entry into Europe. So probably some Ottoman Jew who came and crossed the lines. The Ottomans were at the gates of Vienna in the 1600s, and so someone left a DNA sample on the other side, right? And that turned into the Schoenbergs from this little town in Hungary. That's what you can learn. But I recommend it. As far as privacy, again, there's no issue whatsoever. No one uses these sort of ethnicity DNA studies for anything nefarious, as far as I can tell. How do they do it, by the way? Like, how do they say, oh, you have Italian DNA, and you see all the advertisements, you're Swedish, you're Irish, right? What they do is it's scientific, but not at the same time. They let people say what ethnicity they are, right? So if you're Italian, you say you're Italian, you do their DNA. So they take everybody who says they're Italian, and they take the common denominator, right? Like what covers the most people, and they say that's Italian DNA. But of course, our blood isn't attached to soil. Humans move around. Jews know that more than anybody else. And so there's no DNA that really belongs in any particular era. It just means that today it's more common in a certain area or among a certain population that identifies as X. So anyway, you have to take it all a little bit with a grain of salt, but it can be very interesting. I always say with the value of it, a lot of people sort of think of their DNA information as something valuable. It's not valuable to anybody. Don't be offended, but I sort of compare it to a fart, right? So a fart is not so valuable. If you were able to collect 1 million farts, right, you could sell that. That would be like gas that you could use to run a factory or something like that. So it's the same with DNA, right? So your individual DNA result, no one cares, right? It's not worth anything to anybody, probably not even you. But if you collect, like these companies do, 1 million different DNA results, then you can analyze them in the aggregate and give matches, and it has some value. But your individual DNA doesn't matter to anybody. That's my take on it.
What about the issue of law enforcement using various DNA databases to try and track a criminal, and then even if it's not the criminal, him or herself, they get a cousin or something, and then they look further beyond that. Who is that cousin related to? And maybe that person's a criminal.
Yeah, so,
what's your thought on
so
that?
DNA has been used by genealogists and law enforcement working together to identify suspects in crimes. In general, I'm in favor of catching criminals, so I really don't think it's a problem. The owners of Family Tree DNA, Bennett Greenspan, he sold it to an Australian company, but he also said, like, I got no problem. If someone in my family is a criminal and they rape someone, right, they better get caught, right? So there's no issue there unless you're the criminal. Or wanting to shield the criminal. But the other aspect is you can't hide anymore, right? So even if you decide you're going to hide, your cousin has done it, your uncle has done it, like everybody's done it, and so it's really impossible to hide that way. And the researchers that do this type of work, there are genealogists who use the DNAs. They will use this to come up with potential, right, suspects. And then they will, because they'll sort of work out the family tree and say, well, who could be a cousin to this person, right? And they look and see who is the right age and the right place and the right time, right? That type of thing. And there have been a few successes at that, but it again doesn't concern me so much. Yes, in the back. Yes. Sorry.
Hi, Randy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's good to see you again. I have a little bit of a technical question for Sephardic Jews. If you don't know enough about your grandparents, but you know that there is a very high chance that they are, for example, you know that they are of Moroccan descent, so there is a high chance that they are Jews that converted, especially after, in my case, migration to Egypt from Morocco. I did the DNA test on Ancestry, and it didn't reveal anything. I mean, when I input the names of my parents and grandparents, they can't find any of them. I mean, these are all Arabic names. No matter how much information I add, they can't find anything. And so how would you go about that? Is there any way you could find out?
Yeah, so just, I mean, it can be more difficult in the non-European world because of access to records, right? Like, who's going to get records in Tehran right now? Not so easy. But it's the same all over the Middle East for Syrians and Iraqis and et cetera. So the access to records is a significant problem in those areas. But how do you get help? Again, there are people who are steeped in this, right? So I know several. Raquel Levy Toledano, for example, is a genealogist who works in the field of Moroccan Jews. Jacob Marash, like I know a couple of them. They work on Genie. They work on other platforms. There's for Sephardic Jews, not all non-Ashkenaz are Sephardic, right? But if you think you're Sephardic, there's a Facebook group called the Sephardic Diaspora, which is excellent. There's a non-Jewish guy in Amsterdam who started up named Ton Thielen, and he has access to the records of the Sephardic community in Amsterdam, and he posts constantly things about records they have from the 1700s, oftentimes related to other communities, because it was a wealthy community in Amsterdam. So if you're in Morocco and you need some money for your shul, you'd write to Amsterdam for help, right? So they have sometimes records. So you need to talk to the people who work in that area and see if they have if they can point you in the right direction. Egypt, I had tried to help someone in the Dina Leeds, her family's from Egypt also, and it's a difficult area. But again, a lot of those countries, people sort of moved in and out, right? So like it's sometimes you're from there, but not really from there because they were only there for a generation or two, and you have to move on to somewhere else. I'll say also Moroccan Jews have a lot of, and all Jewish communities have sort of legends of their origin. A lot of the Moroccans believe they came from the mountains, right, down into the, there's, as far as I can tell, no evidence for that for some, so sometimes you have to disregard the family stories. In Yiddish, they call it the Bubemeisen, right? So the grandmother's tale, old wives' tales, we would say in English, right? Sorry, it's a little sexist, I guess, and ageist. But anyway, there are terms in every community for these type of legends, and sometimes you have to sort of let go of the preconceived notions and follow the facts. But there are people working in every area. In Persian, there's a curator who deals just with Persian Jewish families on Genie, for example, who's local here in Los Angeles. For Moroccans, again, for Moroccan Jewish families, I would contact these two other people who will know that community. But it's really and within Morocco, it's different if you're from Casablanca or you're from Fez or from somewhere else, right? So it's all local, right? You have to find your community. But genealogy is sort of a universal thing, right? Everybody at some point wakes up and say, who am I and where did I come from, right? So you're going to find someone who's interested in, even if you're starting out, there's someone who's been doing it for a while.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Like Cochin, right? It's another one. Have to work on.
The Jewish Heritage Museum in New York is the home of Jewish Gen.
So yes, the Museum of Jewish Heritage owns Jewish Gen. So Jewish Gen is a website. I think I have it up here. I was a board. They've gone through a lot of iterations, but I'm a research director for Austrian and Czech research at Jewish Gen, but also sort of a former board member, and they're setting up an advisory board that I'm going to be on. So I'm very familiar and work with them.
Wonderful Zoom classes teaching you how to do genealogy.
Right. So I haven't talked about all the different resources, but really the first stop for Jewish genealogy is this Jewish Gen, jewishgen.org. If you become a member, you can search and actually search 4 fields at once, which I am, right, like this. So you can search 2 different surnames at the same time, very useful for finding marriage records and things like that, or different given names or towns, etc. JewishGen is a data aggregator, right? They collect data. I am involved in donating data to JewishGen. It's a great tool. And, depending on the area, again, you'll have different resources. From JewishGen, for example, if you're searching Poland, you'll get results linking you to a group called Jewish Research Institute Poland, JRI Poland, but you'll find the results on JewishGen, and you can go to that website and see Polish records, for example. There's a guy who's facilitating now in Ukraine an effort to rescue all the Jewish records in Ukraine. There's again, this group in India is indexing them, so he takes them out of archives, family lists, census lists, conscription lists, and they get indexed, and you can find them on JewishGen. So depending on the area, again, some places more information, some places less, but JewishGen is a great place to stop. JewishGen and the Jewish Genealogy portal on Facebook, I would say, are sort of my first
I met
stops.
with one of the genealogists to find out about my family, and I had been told that I was a descendant of a Hasidic rabbi from the 1700s. And I watched him trace what I knew back to this rabbi. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
And
Probably you are already on Genie and part of that lineage on Genie. One of the things that surprises people when they go on to Genie is that it's already all there, right? Because your third cousin already added you in, right? So as soon as you add your name, it pops up as a match, and then you connect, and like everything's done. Not everything's done, but a lot of the work is done, especially if you're from a deep lineage. And we can maybe, I guess it's almost time to finish up. I can talk about sort of deep lineages. Most Jews in America, for better or worse, have not a very deep horizon into their genealogy. It's unfortunate, but a lot of the information is lost in the current generation. But there is a possibility of getting very deep in your genealogy. For the non-Jews, the goal is to link to Charlemagne. Right? Everybody in Europe is descended from Charlemagne, all the nobilities, but then, they each have brothers like Prince Andrew or whatever, or former Prince Andrew, who end up having commoners as grandkids. And so basically everybody in Europe, at least the non-Jews, are descended from Charlemagne. So the goal is finding that path, right? For Jews, Charlemagne, who cares? But you want to be a descendant of Rashi or the Maharal or, King David, if you want to believe that the records go that far, which they don't. But because Jewish genealogy is a thing, like a third of the Bible is genealogy. If you really read it, this begat that, right? There's pages and pages of that. So Jewish genealogy has been a thing for a long time, and so there have been a lot of Jews who've worked on genealogies. And for many of the famous rabbis, there are very detailed and worked out genealogies. I think the Maharal in Prague, who's living dies around 1600, there's something like 1 million descendants identified on Genie, because he has lots of kids, and they have lots of kids, and they all become rabbis, and they go everywhere, and basically everybody is a descendant. I can prove it with some evidence, with graves and things like that. A lot of people find it more difficult, but if you can connect to a rabbinic family, or you can connect to Jews living in a major city like Prague is a good example. Amsterdam is a good example. Frankfurt is probably the deepest. You can go back to 1400, and I have one branch there. You can really go very far and very deep and find connections to all sorts of really interesting people. So that's one of the fun things. I can end maybe by showing the trailer from Fioretta, which Marilyn mentioned. This is a film that I made, sort of a pandemic project in 2022. I had been visiting my cousin. I have a cousin in Venice, Italy, and she said, and I told her I could trace back to a family from the ghetto in Venice. and for her and for me. And she said, oh, that would make a great film. And then I said, who cares? Who's going to make a film? And then I came home and I ran into a filmmaker and I mentioned that story to him. And he said, oh, we're going to do it. And so we ended up going to Prague, and I dragged my son Joey along, and it turned into an actual film, pretty long. But if you want to watch it, let me see if I had it up here. There it is. And I can play the trailer for you. And you can see part of our Malibu home that burned down, unfortunately. But here it is. Let's see. Oops. Is the sound not working?
The descendant of
Sound was working and is now not working. Oh, there it is.
I would hardly believe that you were really the descendant of my hero. I'm just blown away.
I'm about to leave for Vienna, and then Joey's going to come meet me. We're going on a little bit of a roots trip, looking at cemeteries and archives and documents, and we'll see how far back we get. So I get to show you all these neat things.
You're weird.
I am weird, I know. There are just two types of people. The people who know they're crazy and the people who have no idea that they're crazy. I at least know I'm crazy.
You will see things you would never expect to see.
I always have been interested in memory. That was my dream as a little kid. It's in the soil, it's in the air.
It is poetry. It is mystery. You must do it the rest of your life.
Closed. Now what? We're going on a treasure hunt.
30 years ago, my neighbor told me, you have an American cousin here.
Our families were separated after World War II, and they really had no contact at all.
The major point, I think, what Randy always does all his life is bringing people together.
We're tracing our family history back 500 years.
It's nice to know where I came from. Not a lot of people can say that.
We're essentially missing so many generations because of these atrocities that happened in Europe.
So many people came without family, without maybe memories.
I'm the only person in 200 years who wants to look at this, right? He died 400 years ago, and here we are in front of one of his books.
To believe that something this old was owned and created by someone that I share blood with.
I had this dream that I would start painting some pictures of the characters you're like telling me about. It becomes real, you know.
I think for me at least, tracing my family history gives me an entree into the history of the world.
It was like magic. From Venice, they go to Prague, to Vienna, to Los Angeles.
I think I was maybe more surprised at how enjoyable it was for me retracing some of the steps with my son. Looks a little expensive.
We'll take it.
It's that time of life when you start thinking about, okay, who am I going to be and what am I going to do and how am I going to do it?
I will always remember it. You could wear that to the Met Gala.
Yeah, I don't think I want to wear it. I don't want to end up like Shlomo Mocho. He was burned at the stake, after all. Thank you very. Sorry? Fioretta is, without ruining it, is the ancestor that we find in Venice. But you'll have to watch the movie to see more. If this hasn't been enough, Randy, you can get 2 more hours of me palling around with my son Joey. But anyway, thank you very much for inviting me today.
Well, thank you so much for coming and giving us this amazing presentation. And yes, you can watch Fioretta, and you can even watch it for free if you figure it out online, which I was able to do. So you can do that. So I want to thank you, Randy, for such a fascinating and inspiring presentation. We truly appreciate you sharing your knowledge and passion for genealogy with us tonight. On behalf of Sinai Temple and Sisterhood, we would like to present you with a small token of our appreciation and thank everyone who joined us this evening, both in person and on Zoom. We're so glad you could be here. Before you leave, please stop by the table outside the chapel where you'll find program flyers for upcoming events. We hope you'll join us again soon. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. And for those of you who are here, Randy will help guide us through finding our roots, our ancestors. So, thank you.